She lived across the street from me, her house sitting darkly on the corner like a bruised shadow. No one knew much about her. Her name was Mrs. Kellerman, and she had the kind of face that looked like it hadn't smiled in decades. Her grey hair, often pulled back into a bun, so tight it looked painful, left thin strands like cobwebs framing her face. Her house was always shrouded in a heavy silence, interrupted only by the occasional flicker of light through the curtains at odd hours of the night. You never saw her leave the house. Her old Chevy, parked in the driveway like an abandoned relic, never moved. I should have ignored it, but sometimes at night, when I'd hear strange noises coming from her direction, a low groan, like the whine of a wounded animal, or a series of thumping sounds that reverberated through the quiet street, I'd stare out my window, unable to sleep. Curiosity kept me rooted there, watching that lifeless house, its windows like black, unblinking eyes. What could she be doing in there? One night, after lying awake, restless and alone, I decided I had to find out for myself. It was well past midnight when I slipped out of my back door. The air was thick with the scent of dew-covered grass, and the silence wrapped around me like a blanket. Her house loomed ahead, darker and more menacing with each step I took. There was no sign of life, except for a faint light glowing in one of the upper windows. I circled around to the back of the house, where an old wooden gate creaked as I pushed it open, revealing an overgrown yard choked with weeds and vines. A sense of dread gnawed at my stomach, but my curiosity had already taken hold. I slipped through the back door, which surprisingly wasn't locked. The air inside was stale, thick with a pungent odor that stung my nostrils. The darkness seemed to press in on me, but I navigated through it by the thin beam of my phone's flashlight, sweeping across walls papered in faded, peeling floral patterns. The floors creaked under my weight, but I inched forward, my heart pounding in my chest. The first room was a dusty kitchen. Dirty dishes filled the sink, their edges crusted with mold. A pot of something murky and foul-smelling sat abandoned on the stove, and a spider had woven its web over the faucet. I moved through the living room next, where old furniture lay shrouded in heavy dust and cobwebs. The fireplace was filled with cold ashes. And then a noise pierced the silence, a low, muffled groan coming from upstairs. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The sound was unmistakable now, like a long, drawn-out sob echoing through the walls. It chilled my blood and made the hairs on my arms stand on end, but I had come too far to turn back now. I crept up the stairs, each step groaning beneath my weight. The groan grew louder with each step, more insistent, like something was in pain. The door at the end of the hallway was slightly ajar, and a thin sliver of light leaked out from the gap. When I pushed it open, the hinges let out a long wail. Inside was a dimly lit room. A single bulb swung slowly from the ceiling, casting long shadows over everything. And there, in the corner, sat Mrs. Kellerman. She was perched on a low stool, her thin frame bent and hunched. Her head was bowed, and her hair hung over her face in limp strands. Her hands, mottled and veined, gripped the edges of the stool so tightly her knuckles were white. She didn't move. She didn't even acknowledge my presence. Then, she started to hum. A slow, eerie melody that slithered out of her lips like smoke. I edged closer, flashlight held out in front of me, and that's when I noticed something strange. Her eyes were wide open, but her pupils were rolled back into her head, leaving only the whites visible. Her lips twitched, and the humming grew louder. My flashlight flickered, and when the light returned, I finally noticed something horrifying. The walls were covered in photographs. Rows and rows of photographs, pinned to the peeling wallpaper, each one showing different people staring blankly into the camera. All of them had the same empty expression, their eyes dull and lifeless. And in the corner of each photograph was a small symbol, a circle with 3 diagonal lines slashed through it. And then I saw my own face, staring back at me from one of the photographs. The blood drained from my face, and I stumbled backwards, nearly dropping my phone. That's when Mrs. Kellerman turned her head. Her eyes, now focused directly on me, burned with a sickly, feverish intensity. Her lips curled into a smile that seemed to stretch too wide for her face, and she started to laugh. A deep, guttural laugh that echoed off the walls. I bolted. Down the stairs and out the back door, I ran all the way home, my pulse thundering in my ears. The following day, I called the police. But when they arrived at Mrs. Kellerman's house, they found nothing. No photographs. No Mrs. Kellerman. Just an empty, abandoned house. The old Chevy was still there, though, still parked in the driveway like an unwanted guest. The police checked the registration and told me it had been registered to a Mrs. Eleanor Kellerman, who had died 15 years ago. Sometimes I still think about that night, about Mrs. Kellerman's haunting laughter and those lifeless photographs pinned to her wall. I try not to dwell on it too much, but occasionally, when I lie awake in bed, I hear her humming. That slow, eerie melody that slithers out of the darkness. And sometimes, I think I can see a faint light glowing from that upstairs window, but I think it's just my paranoid imagination. At least, I hope it is. When I first moved into the neighborhood, I didn't pay much attention to the man living next door. He seemed like just another quiet neighbor, the kind that blends into the scenery of suburban life. But now, I can't shake the feeling that he's always watching me, lurking, just out of sight. He's tall and gaunt, with a gaze that feels like it's piercing through your soul. His name is Mr. Harrow, and he lives alone in the dilapidated house next door. The house itself is an oddity, a relic from another era. Its paint is peeling, the lawn is overgrown, and the windows are covered with layers of dust and grime. It's as if time itself forgot this corner of the neighborhood. The first time I noticed something strange was when I returned home late from work one night. The glow of a single dim bulb flickered in Mr. Harrow's living room window, casting eerie shadows on the curtains. At first, I thought nothing of it. But then I saw a silhouette standing perfectly still, unmoving, staring in my direction. I quickly walked inside, locking the door behind me. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced through the blinds. He was still there, frozen like a statue. After a while, the light flickered off, and the silhouette vanished. Over the next few weeks, I tried to convince myself that it was just a coincidence. But things got stranger. Mr. Harrow seemed to always be outside, tending to his neglected garden or sweeping the porch. Every time I would step outside, I would catch glimpses of him staring at me. His presence felt like a cold breeze, sending shivers down my spine. I started noticing other odd details. Sometimes, I'd hear the slow creak of his front door opening in the dead of night, or see a faint light moving from room to room through the cracks in his blinds. He never waved or acknowledged my presence, just watched in silence. Even when I passed him on the sidewalk, he would simply nod stiffly and shuffle away without a word. One evening, curiosity got the better of me. I stood on my porch, pretending to fiddle with a broken step while keeping an eye on his house. Just after sunset, I saw him emerge from the darkness, clutching a small metal box. He glanced around nervously before hurrying down the street and disappearing into the nearby woods. My curiosity piqued, and I followed from a distance. The moonlight illuminated through the trees as I crept behind him, careful to stay hidden. Mr. Harrow eventually reached a clearing and stopped in front of an old, gnarled tree. He set down the box, knelt beside it, and muttered something under his breath. I couldn't make out the words, but they had a rhythmic, almost ritualistic cadence. After what felt like an eternity, he buried the box at the base of the tree, digging with a small garden shovel, and stood up. He lingered for a moment, his gaze sweeping through the darkness before he turned back and hurried home. I waited until he was out of sight, then approached the tree. My pulse quickened as I dug into the soft earth with my bare hands, unearthing the metal box. It was rusted and dented, with a heavy padlock securing the lid. I brought it back to my garage, and after some struggle managed to break the lock with a hammer. Inside I found an assortment of old photographs, newspaper clippings, and yellowing letters. As I sifted through the contents, a sickening realization settled in my gut. The photographs showed Mr. Harrow standing with a series of different families, always at the edge of the frame, his expression cold and distant. The families varied in age and appearance, but one thing remained consistent. Every family in the photographs had disappeared. Each family had been reported missing within months of the photographs being taken, according to the sharply scribbled date on the photos and the newspaper clippings. The letters were even more disturbing, filled with pleas for help, warnings about strange noises at night, and descriptions of a gaunt man lurking near their homes. My hands shook as I packed everything back into the box. I knew I had to report this to the police, but one thought gnawed at my mind. What if he was watching me right now, aware I had unearthed his secret? I tried to calm myself with a hot shower, but as I stood under the running water, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The bathroom felt too quiet, the air too still. I quickly dried off and stepped out, only to find my bedroom window wide open, curtains fluttering in the cold wind. I bolted to the window and peered outside. There, in the dim glow of the moonlight, stood Mr. Harrow, staring up at my window with that cold, unblinking gaze. I slammed my window shut and locked it, my heart hammering in my chest as I paced around the room trying to think clearly. I couldn't stay here any longer. I grabbed the metal box and fled through the back door, not stopping until I reached my car. The police didn't take long to respond after I called them, but by the time they arrived, Mr. Harrow's house was empty. They searched the place thoroughly, uncovering rooms filled with more faded photographs, old newspapers, and personal items that couldn't have belonged to Mr. Harrow. They never found him. I moved out of that neighborhood shortly after, but I still have nightmares about his gaunt silhouette standing perfectly still behind the window, staring at me. I dread to think that maybe one day I'll be the one captured in his next photograph.